Top Shot is a marksmanship competition where we are going through some of the most crazy challenges, right? That are, there's just nowhere else in the world, right? Where you can, shoot from a zip line at exploding targets.
Here. Haha, there we are. Another episode of Open Action with me, John McClain, brought to you by Armscor Precision. And this episode, I've got a pretty cool guest. This guy, I remember watching him on the History Channel as he was winning Season 4 of Top Shot. Prior to that, pretty interesting, he was a Google app technical support employee. And then he ended up becoming an author for a book called Shoot to Win. And if you haven't figured out who that is yet, then it's Chris Cheng. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, John. It's going to be a fun discussion for sure.
Yeah, I think so, because, one, it's been a while. I can't, I remember Top Shot coming out and the craze that it had on the nation. Like, everybody, I almost felt like we were almost, about to break through in, the regular normal society as being firearms owners and stuff like that. And then, of course, Sandy Hooks happened. But, because Top Shot came out, and then that was when Three Gun Nation started building a lot of momentum. It was on the NBC Sports Network and all that kind of stuff. So, but that was a show that I watched religiously. And it was so cool to watch someone that was like, yeah, I kind of shoot for fun and whatnot to be able to go all the way. Because it kind of does. The reason I liked that the most was because it really proved that shooting's for everybody. It doesn't if you've never shot a gun before, it could be one of those things that you just pick up and you have a natural ability and gift for, but you'll never know until you try. So I always thought that was just a cool experience. But what was tell everybody that watched the show, or maybe they'll go back and watch it now. What was the process to even get onto the show to begin with for you?
It was a pretty intense process. They have tens of thousands of people who, it's an open application process, so anybody can apply. And there is a document that it's a 10-page document with a bunch of questions asking about your background with firearms, asking if you or your family has been involved in any historical moments, in U.S. military history, or any notable law enforcement events where a firearm was used. Right, they're sort of digging for interesting stories. Right, people, Americans who have fascinating backgrounds or experiences, right, with firearms. There's a lot of Olympic shooters, right, that come onto Top Shot, so they're looking for the military, the lifelong hunter, the Olympic, shooter, the, law enforcement officer. But they're also just looking for regular guys like me who just shoot for fun. But it was a very competitive process. And, knowing that, I wanted to make sure that, well, one, I wanted to be competitive. I mean, I don't compete in something if I don't intend to win it. And in order to win it, especially as a self-taught amateur, I knew I was really far behind the curve, right? And so, the application process was sort of, right, it's sort of its own process and its own beast, where it's that paper application, it's live interviews, with the production, crew and the casting director. There's also a shooting competition as part of the audition process, which was very nerve-wracking, but a lot of fun. There's the top 50 of us, got flown to LA, and we were at the Burbank, I think it's called the Burbank Rifle or Burbank Revolver Club, something like that. And 50 of us, competed with, let's see, I think it was a 1911, M14, M1 Garand, and a Browning Buckmark, right? And so there were 4 different types of mini, they weren't Top Shot challenges. They're really just marksmanship challenges, right? And more like accuracy and, speed challenges. And here's a fun fact, Top Shot, great show, obviously, but, it is a TV show, right, at the same time. And so, just because you're a great shooter doesn't make you great for TV, right? So one thing that was interesting is, some of the best shooters in the group, they didn't get cast
Hmm.
because they were boring, right? They just weren't good for a television show, right? Like it was, from what I heard of these interviews, they're like more like the military law enforcement guys where they get asked a question and they would answer with one or two word answers, yes,
Mm.
sir, no, sir, it was a great time, sir. And it's like, so there's got to be, it's this mix of, of course, like, right, personalities, but also talent, right? And at the end of the day, Top Shot is a marksmanship competition where we are going through some of the most crazy challenges, right? That there's just nowhere else in the world, right? Where you can shoot from a zip line at exploding targets, or get, for me, like one of my favorite challenges was shooting an M1919 machine gun from the back of a half-track vehicle that served in World War II, and they simulated this World War II battlefield with exploding mortars, and the targets exploded, and we only had 100 rounds in this M1919 machine gun to blow up 20 targets, and the vehicle's going at like 30 miles an hour, and it's bumpy. But it's these unique experiences, right? We're shooting period weapons on period vehicles in a simulated, period era and moment that is just quintessential Top Shot. And what a wonderful experience. It totally changed my life. And, to comment quickly about one thing that you said at the intro here about how Top Shot, I mean, Top Shot changed my life in so many great ways. And it brought regular Joes like me into the gun community and gun culture. And it was such a special time, right? 2009 to 2012. You just had millions of people watching Top Shot, and it did wonders bringing regular people, right? Regular Americans who, I've heard from so many Top Shot fans that they never really enjoyed or were interested in shooting until they saw Top Shot. And
Hmm.
it was a positive experience, right, for the non-gun owner, right, seeing responsible Americans going out and having a really fun time shooting guns, and that was such a positive imprint, right, on our country's psyche and approach to firearms. And we all know, now Top Shot ran for 5 seasons, what a great run. But since it stopped, right, and Three Gun Nation also, right, is stopped, and there's just really no good, high quality, firearms, competitions on, programming on TV. And now it's all dominated by mass shootings, by criminals, right, doing bad things with guns, and we're just lacking these more positive examples of Americans, using firearms for fun, for self-defense, and in a responsible and safe way. So my hope, my fantasy is that one day Top Shot or something like Top Shot will come back. But in the meantime, yeah, it's I don't know, something in the past for the time being.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why it was so entertaining to watch, like Three Gut Nation, don't be wrong, it was entertaining for me to watch, but it was also because like I knew practically everyone that was on the show, so it was funny for me to like watch them and listen to them do their interviews because I was like, bro, awkward much, like I could tell them as they were sitting next to me or whatnot. And what they kind of sort of had right was the options, but like from a shooter, I understood what was going on. From someone that never knew what was going on in a competition, even when I show videos at USPSA matches, and people are like, "Are you hitting the targets?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, they're cardboard. The bullets are going right through them, right? Like they're just seeing the bullets hit the dirt." And Three Gun Nation kind of did this thing though, where they tried to incorporate clay and steel as much as they could, and especially in the later times when I was on the show, where it was all like reactive targets, steel targets, clays and stuff, because visually it's either a hit or a miss. Like instantaneously if that shooter hit the target because it either blew up or it fell over or you heard a ding or something like that. And I think that was what Top Shot got so right, was that they made the shooting sports fun to watch because of how reactive everything was. Like it was an instantaneous nope, it didn't blow up, so they didn't hit it. And then when it did hit, it blew up. And they even did like the slow motion video, which I always thought was really cool and all that kind of stuff with those targets. So I think visually and from an audible level too, that was one of the ways that they got the American consumer to sit down on the couch and watch the show and consume it, was because that entertainment side of it was like,
Absolutely.
did they hit it or not? Did they hit it? It's like, oh yeah, they hit it, so.
Yeah, the cinematography and just the immersiveness, right? That you felt as a viewer, you felt you're with me, right? And with all the shooters in the action. And one of my career goals is to somehow, again, like revive a Top Shot-esque kind of competition, but really, like, what I think about is more about like the major leagues, right? What is so currently our major league sort of shooting, sports sort of revolves around the Olympics, right? Olympic shooting with like trap and skeet, double trap, and biathlon kind of activities, right? But those only happen every 4 years, and we don't have the equivalent of Major League Baseball, right, or the NFL or the NHL or the NBA. So, the fun part about the shooting sports is, as there's so many different disciplines, but that's a good thing and a bad thing when we're talking about sort of mass appeal, right? Broad appeal. Like, what is a shooting sport that's going to fill a stadium full of 20,000 people, right? Like, I don't even know if we have that sport right now, right? What is that competition? I think it could have been Three Gun, or I think, Three Gun Nation was onto something, and a lot of great things that, were going on with Three Gun Nation programming. But yeah, it's, right. What is our sort of standard shooting sport that can provide not just a pro gun platform, but just a competition league, right? So if you are 7 years old, right, instead of just choosing between little league and Pee Wee football and other sort of quote standard sports, I would love for there eventually to be some sort of junior shooting option that eventually, right, you shoot in junior high, you shoot in high school, you shoot on a college team, and then you could make it to the big leagues, right? Whatever that looks like for our shooting sports. So that's something that I've been noodling about a little bit. And part of this is technology, right? So if we think about baseball and if we think about golf, so maybe golf's like the better example here, right? Golf, there's an analogy here, right? Bullets are obviously very small, right? Very hard for cameras to track. And golf used to be a very boring sport to watch until the camera technology caught up. And these cameras, right, were able to track balls getting hit off of the tee, right? And literally being able to track these balls, like coming off the tee, flying through the air, and then right, landing wherever they land. And if you think about, football, actually football is maybe a better example. Like there's lots of technology, right? That if you look at an NFL game today versus like 20 years ago, right? It's like all the digital overlays, the tracking of the ball, like even like the yellow, first down line, right? These are very like simple technology, innovations that we need something, I think, like that in the shooting sports, especially if we're ever going to be able to broadcast the stuff live. Reactive targets, critical, right? We've got to have reactive targets. We've got to have shooters moving, targets moving, but right, there also just needs to be a standard sports template, right? It's like baseball, football. It's all the same, right? It's always the same game. That's where trap and skeet, right, have a leg up on Three Gun, because Three Gun, right, it's like you never shoot the same stage more than once, which it's cool, but probably maybe not great for a standardized, right, televised shooting sport. So those are some of my thoughts, though. I think, the technology will, I think, eventually help solve for some of this, but I think we just sort of need to create a new shooting sport, right? That is sort of, it's got to become like the one sort of universal sport that the general public will come to learn and love. Like that's my fantasy. That's one of my dreams.
Yeah, shooting is a difficult thing to try and figure out how to get into the mainstream media or into the mainstream world for a couple of reasons. One is, and the biggest reason, which is something that I've recently started getting really into, was with suppressors. I realized how much more enjoyable shooting is, not just as a shooter, but also being around. Like when I'm talking to people or when I'm instructing them, handing them my rifle that has a suppressor on it makes it so much easier for me to communicate and all that kind of stuff. And from a third person party, like, you know, most people that come to the range to watch you shoot, you know, whether or not it's a friend or a family member or something like that, like they have to have eye and ear protection because of ricochets and all that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, it's very hard to encourage, you know, thousands of people to come out here and risk getting ricocheted and all that kind of stuff. Not that it happens very often, but it does happen, right? But like to spend all day like in the heat and out in the sun wearing ear protection and eye protection and lenses fogging up when you start getting excited or whatever, stuff like that. It's like, I know, like if you told me like, hey, do you want to come out and stand around in the desert for 4 hours and watch a whole bunch of people shoot? I'd be like, well, can I drink? You know, like, and then it was like, well, do you want to? Like, it's 110 degrees. Like, well, I need to do something to make me happy because everything you just described is, first of all, I'm watching people shoot. I'm not shooting. Secondly, it's hot as hell. Third, I have to have eye protection, ear protection the entire time. Like, that kind of sucks, right? So it's not necessarily a super enjoyable experience, but like something I found that could be a good spectator sport that incorporates firearms, and maybe I'd like to see gain a little bit more traction. This is because a couple of my friends, when I worked in the EMS world, did this, was the mounted shooting. Because it's so cowboyish, like, you know, it's the single action revolvers, but like they shoot in a stadium. So there are people that are sitting around the arena that can watch, but they're only shooting blanks. They have to pop the balloons while they're on horseback. And like that visually is just a very cool, like we said, like it's a reactive target. You know whether or not they hit the target or not. And then it's exciting in the fact that like you've got a timer, you've got this person that's also riding a horse and having to draw pistols and then put one away and grab the other one and stuff. So like visually that's kind of a cool sport. But the second thing that I feel is our biggest hurdle to overcome is mainstream sponsors. I always find it so comical that, you know, Red Bull they've got an F1 team, so they will talk about you know, they're okay with supporting two drivers that have their logo on them, driving 210 miles an hour and then taking turns at 120 miles an hour and then potentially sliding, going into walls, flipping their cars and all that kind of stuff. That's okay. Then they've got some of the most extreme sports like the Red Bull air races. Okay, so now you got a guy flying an airplane going 10 Gs, making these turns, you know, over water and all that kind of stuff and could potentially black out. Nope, that's perfectly fine. It's dangerous, but it's fine. There was one, I can't remember the name of it, but basically it's like a 3-day event where these BMX riders get to go up on a mountain and they just tell them like, okay, from this marker to this marker, that's your area that you can ride. So these guys go up there and they build their own little path that they're going to ride, and they're doing tricks and stuff while they're making these like 40 and 50 yard jump gaps over a mountain with a bunch of rocks and stuff like that. That's okay. But then you go like, hey, Red Bull, would you like to sponsor an event where, you know, there's some firearms, but like we haven't had any serious like deaths or serious injuries or stuff like that really been associated with our sport. You know, everyone's very respectful and we're very safety conscious and all that kind of. No, I don't want anything to do with that. I'll stick with the super fast cars, the super fast planes, and the daredevils, you know, flipping around mountains. But to get a mainstream brand and multiple ones, right? Because the last thing that I find is going on is that we're kind of cannibalizing ourselves in that, you know, I remember when I was getting into 3-gun, there were like 12 or 13 matches a year. Those were the big 12 or 13 matches. Like they were on the calendars, and those were the matches that everyone went to and all that kind of stuff, right? So when you've got, let's just say 80 companies that are sponsoring these 13 matches, there's a pretty good spread of prizes and stuff for everyone, money and, you know, support. Well, then now all of a sudden next year, instead of only being 13 matches, there was 28, but there's still only 80 sponsors. And the next year after that, there were 52 and still only 80 sponsors. So it was like, and everyone said, oh, we got the next greatest match and it sold out and it did this and it did that. So it was kind of like, well, you know, and that's why, like, I always felt like, prize tables are cool when you're up and coming, and they're a good way for me to like, when you get to the higher levels. Yeah, obviously you walk the prize table, you take a gun certificate or something like that off the table. We normally turn around and sell them, not because like we just spent $2,000 to win a $400 pistol. We got to recoup something back, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
But like at the same time, I always felt like if you like when I was a lower class shooter, it was kind of fun to walk the prize table at 220th place, but you almost feel like, okay, well maybe it would have been better off if like, maybe the top 50 people got prizes and then everyone else like, you hope you had a good time and hope you enjoyed the stages and all that kind of stuff. Because I went golfing, I don't know, a week or two ago. And when I got done playing golf, I didn't walk into the clubhouse and say, hey, where's my free sleeve of balls and a hot dog? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I paid my money, I went and played 18 holes, and then I left because that was the experience.
There's almost a kind of like participation trophy expectation that was set, right, with three gun prize tables, which I mean, on the one hand, like you said, I mean, yeah, it's like it can be $2,000, right, in a weekend, right, between airfare or gas, lodging, all the ammo and food, and so it's unfortunately not a cheap sport. And that's a whole nother thread. But yeah, the prize table piece, it's like, what I agree with you, like where you're getting at is like, that's just like not a sustainable model, right? Yeah. Where everybody gets something from the sponsor's perspective. It's like, hey, yeah, maybe only the top, 10% or whatever. So make it just the best, right? The sort of the top people win, because then it can become a career for people. Right.
Exactly.
And right. You and I, right, we were on the professional 3-gun circuit, and it's like, I did it for 4 years. I had a ton of fun. I had an incredible amount of fun, but I knew going into this, I'm like, look, all I wanted to ever win was Top Shot. That's it. Like, that's all I ever wanted to win. I don't care if I won Rocky Mountain. I don't care if I won Superstition. It was like, I was there just to have a good time. And right, there just isn't enough prize money, right? Like, it's just like, of course, winning a gun is amazing, a lot of fun, but in order to make this a viable, sustainable career, people need to win money, right? Because that's what's going to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, cash only gets paid out of the top three slots, like maybe more if you're lucky, but like, and then of course, like only the top 10 shooters, right, are the best of us, really have kind of a chance, right, at placing in the money. So like, right, this 3-gun as a career is incredibly hard. I mean, right, and so like that, I think that's another kind of challenge and problem that we need to solve if we ever want 3-gun to become long-term sustainable sport for our industry.
Well, in reality, it's impossible, like because. We talk about, okay, so maybe it's $2,000 to go to a match, but like me personally, I'm getting ready to go to multi-gun nationals here in like the next week and a half, right? So I had my match fee. I was around like $300 or something like that. I got my hotel room, which came out to like $1,200 for the entire time I'm there. I'm driving, so I just got to pay for gas on the way up and gas on the way back. But that doesn't include, like, that $2,000 just to go to the match does not include the fact that over the past month, I've shot 3,000 rounds of 9mm, 2,000 rounds of 223, 250 rounds of shotgun shells, plus another 20 slugs, and all the time and energy and effort that I put in at the range and all that kind of stuff. So even though like the price tag only looks like 2,000, I'm actually probably closer to like 4,000 or 5,000 just preparing for the match. And then that doesn't include the fact that it's not like I just woke up one day and said, yeah, I'm going to go shoot multi-gun national and started training. I've been doing this for, like 12 years. So like now we're multiplying that by every match that I've gone to and stuff. So there's so much time and money and energy invested that it's impossible to make 3-gun a career or make shooting a career unless you work for a company that allows you to do it. So I work for Armscor and Rock Island Armory. Great job. And I'll tell you this, like I love my job so much that like the last couple of years, my all of my PTO has been cashed out back to me because I never felt the need to take a vacation, because every time I got to go to a match while I was there
Yeah.
representing the company and
Awesome,
shooting,
man.
that was my way of, venting and relaxing and just having fun. So
Yeah.
when I came back and it was like Monday morning, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to get back to work. Like, I had a good weekend. I had fun. Like, let's do it. So, but like Tiger Woods didn't leave the golf course and then go to Nike to start working at the office afterwards, like on Monday. He went to the driving range and the shipping range and the putting putt. That was his
Yep.
job, was to play golf.
Yeah.
It wasn't to
Yep.
be a Nike employee. So that's kind of like what I consider a professional shooter, a
Athlete,
professional.
yeah.
Like I think very closely. There's a few people that have accomplished it. One is AMU. If you're on AMU, your job is to shoot. Like, yes,
Yep.
you are a soldier, and if they need you, they can deploy you and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, their job is to shoot and win matches. That's what they get paid for. The second person that has now stepped up, second, let's go with Jerry Michalek, because that guy's literally been,
Yeah.
like I think he probably helped build and develop guns, not because it was necessarily a job, but probably because he was like, well, I'm doing it anyway. I'm always trying to find new ways to improve things. So let's just, make this a project, which is, that whole thing of like, well, if you actually love what you do, then you'll never work a day in your life kind of thing. So Jerry was one guy that I think was able to kind of make shooting the way he pays his bills and stuff. And then the new breed of people are like Max Michel and Nils Jonas and stuff like their job, like Nils, I remember when he used to work at a gun club, and now he doesn't work at a gun club. He literally goes to the range, trains, shoots, occasionally will go and do trade shows and events and stuff like that for Canik. But for the most part, his job is to fly around or drive around from match to match and win with a Canik. So like those are the people that I consider the professional shooters. I'm not a professional shooter. I'm a sponsored shooter that works in the gun industry. So like I work for my major sponsor, but I'm not a professional by any means necessary. But so it's like I can't imagine pulling off any of these things without the support from my. Could you try again? No, sir. Mind your business. What a nosy bitch, right?
Boy, she's listening. She's probably gonna have some opinions on all of this.
Right? That's the NSA be like, hold on, can you repeat that last part?
Yeah.
But so like that's one thing for me that like I think from the shooting sports perspective, like it would be awesome to see it make a more mainstream hit, but I just, and especially with all the politics, because like even if we were able to come up with some sort of foundation or what, I mean, and even from a hunter standpoint now, like if you want to have a show on TV, you have to pay to have your show put on TV. It's not someone paying you to have your show on the show, right?
That's just not
so you got to make your money
either.
through sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, which again brings us back to the mainstream media. Like how do you get beer companies, tobacco companies, like all these companies that, are the ones that spend millions of dollars on the Super Bowl to have ads and stuff. It's like,
and in my mind, a lot like this is a little bit of a, if we build it, they will come, right? And it's I think the pressure point and the leverage is right. If there's if we can create a viable, sustainable spectator sport, right? Where people, again, want to go to a stadium or a place, right, where they can sit, they can order beer, they can order food, and they can be an engrossed and engaged spectator, right? If you get 10,000 people into a stadium or whatever, right, and that's where the advertising dollars can come into play, because once there's eyeballs, right, that's what advertisers are looking for, right? They want to know, hey, like, do you have eyeballs that are literally going to see our ads? So, And this is where the culture changes, right? And that's really like another key point, right? To your comments about advertise, a lot of mainstream advertisers, right, probably don't want to touch anything to do with a gun because of all the the PR, the politics and stuff. But if there's a critical mass of Americans who want to see, professional shooters, right, competing in competitions, and there's a shooting league and it's televised and if it becomes this whole, right, professional league, then advertisers, I think, are more likely to come on board. So because of if we change the culture too, right, people might hopefully over time, right, continue to be less afraid of regular law-abiding citizens owning firearms. And this is a this is a hearts and minds play, right?
Mm,
It's going to take decades. We've obviously come a long way, but the past decade post Sandy Hook has been brutal, right?
yeah,
It's been a nonstop battle, not just for our Second Amendment rights, but to just simply what's the
exist.
phrase? Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, yeah, just to like justify our existence. I felt that was a little too grandiose, but yeah, it's sort of like, or just to like normalize gun ownership, right? That when I live in San Francisco, right, and so when people learn that right, that I was a top shot champion, right, that I own lots of guns, I see myself as an ambassador, right, to make a good example, right, for the rest of us in the gun community to just say, look, like I'm a regular guy, right? I have guns for home defense, for self defense, and for fun. The vast majority of the time, I'm using guns for fun, right? And they're
Right.
very safe if you right are trained. And that is a fun and a joy that I want to share, right, with as many people as possible. And so, right, we all have the ability to make a difference in this regard, right? And it's by simply bringing new people to the range, being great positive examples, right, and ambassadors, right, of freedom and gun rights, and just showing people that look, like all these assholes out there that are killing people with guns, like that's not us, right? Those are like just totally different. Like I'm not associated with them. Like I don't care if they own an AR-15 and I own an AR-15. It's like, dude, if somebody gets like if they're a drunk driver and they're driving a Ford and I own a Ford, it's like I have nothing to do with the drunk driver, right? I don't condone drunk driving. But we if we don't push back, right? If gun owners, if we don't push back against these false associations, right, that people are making with us law-abiding gun owners with criminals, right? Like we need to push back and just tell them no, like we have nothing to do with these criminals, and that for me is, I know it can be very difficult, right, for gun owners to stand up for ourselves. I mean, that's a big part of what this is, and when someone's talking negatively about firearms, this can sometimes look like you speaking up, be like, hey, I'm a gun owner, right? And trying to positively engage in a conversation. And all right, sometimes those conversations can be fruitful and sometimes they're terrible, right? And that's just sort of the thick and the thin of it all. But I think the worst thing though is we just can't be silent, right? We have to find certain avenues to continually speak up and again push back against this constant anti-gun rhetoric that demonizes you and me and millions of other law-abiding Americans. It's just it's unfair, it's unjust, and again, we have to use our voices and speak up and speak against it.
Well, and the very frustrating part about this is that no matter how much we speak up, a lot of stuff, like unless it's a face-to-face interaction, we can be censored. Like I know for a fact that like my YouTube channel, my Instagram pages, my Facebook pages, and all that kind of stuff are, we're just gonna call it shadow banning. But
Shadow banning,
basically,
yeah.
yeah, I mean they're basically like refusing to show my anything that I put out. And it's funny because I try and throw the algorithm off all the time. Like anyone that watches my YouTube channel and like all the shorts that I post, like I do a lot of firearm stuff, but then I'll randomly throw in just like these random funny comical things because I'm trying to show like, okay, this is a gun, this is a gun. Okay, now this is just me being stupid. This is about comedy. This is about, being a smartass or whatever. And then here's another gun, here's another gun. But like I do see a difference. There's some of my reels where like I'll get, 5, 6, 7,000 views in 24 hours, and then another reel that is like, oh yeah, you got 34 views in the last month. And it's like, okay, that one was a gun related. This one was me
Yeah.
talking about, you know, some sort of stupid Star Wars theme or something like that, right? So,
Or some amazing pair of pants that you just bought and
yeah,
you're
exactly,
sporting.
right. Why I'm wearing them, but and it becomes like this frustrating thing too, because the other thing that we're battling, like it's surprising how gullible some people are, or how much they refuse to look at data and accept what is truth and not. Because, like, you know, we as a gun owner, I think any gun owner you talk to, we all understand one thing, and that's California crime rate is insane. Chicago crime rate is insane, and New York crime rate is insane. And they are also three of the most heavily suppressed states and cities for firearms owners.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just like, and yet there's still so many crimes that are committed by firearms. So you're like, well, you sure have done a lot of banning, but it's really not doing anything, because Chicago is still one of like the deadliest cities to go to for gun related crimes and other crimes too. But like, you made guns illegal, so how is it that gun crimes are still happening? You know, it's the same reason why cocaine and heroin are illegal, and yet there's still people that overdose on both of those on a regular basis. Drunk driving is illegal, but there's still so many DUIs out there, you know? And when someone drives a car through a crowd of people, they shun the person that was driving the car. They were an evil person. They're just sick in the head. I can't believe anyone would do that, right? If someone takes a baseball bat and starts smashing people's heads in, that guy's a sicko. Like, what? No one's banning baseball. No one's banning your Cadillac from going 200 miles an hour. But as soon as a gun is involved, all of a sudden, and it's funny, we see it in all our articles, right? Like, an AR-15 fully semi-automatic was used, right? And you're like, okay, first of all, that's a Kel-Tec. That's not even an AR-15. Second of all, you're right, it is fully semi-auto because it can't do anything other than be semi-auto. So I guess technically you're right in a very dumb way. You know, it's like the clickbait and the amount of manipulation, as we've said, is just so upsetting. And that's why you can't even have a conversation with some people, because like they've just got their four lines of dialogue that they want to cover, right? Well, you got to do it for the kids. It's stop the mass killings. Your kids are not as important as your gun rights, apparently, and stuff like that. And you're just kind of like, man, go pull a gun out or go pull a knife out at a bank and see what happens. A guy with a gun's going to show up and put you down, right? Because money is important, which is why they have armed guards there typically. Why is it we don't have armed guards? Like, and I'll say this, in Vegas, when I went to high school, we had armed police officers. Yeah, we had two guys that were stationed at our school. It's not that they had 3 different schools that they had to drive around to throughout the day. We had 2 officers and eventually a third. Their only job was to cruise the halls. They rode their bicycles, and they just patrolled the entire school the entire time.
Same. Yeah, I went to public school in Southern California. We had an Orange County Sheriff's deputy at our high school all the time, and it's yeah. Oh, we can go in so many different directions.
I know, right?
Where do I want to comment here? As a technologist, you know, so I my day job, you know, has been here in Silicon Valley, and as much of a pro technologist as I am, you know, social media has really reduced our ability to have civil conversations, right? Especially on topics where we disagree. And, you know, the algorithms that we see, right? Shadow banning and also just online platforms and discussions generally do not lend themselves to civil, respectful, and nuanced conversations, which
because no one is right there in front of you to punch you in your face when you say something about their mother. But online, you can sit there and type all you want about their mother.
all these keyword commandos, exactly, mouth off. And of course, hey, like, it doesn't feel good to get insulted online, but of course, hey, whatever. It's just, you know, internet people. But, you know, I am a little heartened by some developments in terms of, you know, younger generations are not spending as much time on certain social media platforms. And I think I even saw some data a few years ago that I think it was Gen Z that is spending less time like online, something like that. Now, if that's the case, there are certain pockets of I mean, you know, across all generations of digital detox, right? Less screen time and getting outside or doing offline things. And for me, like, that is a key part of getting us back to a civil place, right? Where you have to actually talk to people in person, look them in the eye, like, right? There's just a very different dynamic talking to somebody in person than online, right? It's like, the online, it's just, I just don't consider it to be real life in so many ways, right? If you're having an online discussion, it's like, it just gets lost in the ether in a very different way than an in-person conversation happens. So I hope more people, I mean, I am trying to digital detox as well, right? Less screen time. I'm trying to read more physical books, and when I get a physical newspaper, I actually like love it. Just having, ink on my fingers, and I mean, I'm a little old school
I was about
in
to
that
say, I think that's
regard.
where we disagree because my Audible account has been my best friend for the last couple years.
I love it. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you look through the centuries, right, every piece of technology, whether we're talking about, the printing press, the electricity, telephone, radio, it goes through these moments of disruption,
Hmm.
right? There were these very disruptive moments, right? When the printing press came out, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like all the propaganda that people and governments and the church is going to be able to spread is going to destroy society. And of course, yeah, sure, there's lots of lies and falsehoods, and that still exists today. But the point is, we figured it out, right? Social media will not be the demise of society, but we're going through a pretty tumultuous period, right? And 10 years from now, though, hopefully we should be in a better place, right? Where people will
That
just
is,
sort
if
of,
AI doesn't make us blow everyone up because an AI Putin told AI Biden to, stick it where the sun don't shine or something. I'll tell you what, man. There was speaking of other podcasts, I've been a big fan of the Joe Rogan Experience for the last year and a half or so, and there was a podcast that he had two guys on. I can't remember what YouTube channel they had. I'll have to look it up. But they did this. There were these two scientists that have been studying this idea of how the pyramids, Stonehenge, like all of these ancient places that exist that we can't figure out how they did it was from a civilization that was way more advanced than we are now, that got wiped out from a cataclysmic cosmic event like a meteor striking the earth and being an earth killer. And how, simple things like, we look at hieroglyphics and we think like, oh, that was like the cave people, like, oh,
yeah,
unga
yeah.
bunga, right? Like just draw. But the other side of it is like, you look at technology now, if a meteor were to strike the earth right now and cover the world in dust, be an earth killer, planet killer, and space travel is possible and there's other life out there, and they come to investigate our planet, they start digging up and they start looking up like certain fossils, like, wait, what are they going to do when they look at a computer? They're going to be like, what is this? Like, what was
Yeah.
that was a very weird like device that they used. They all must have worshipped them because they were in every house, right?
Everywhere.
Like,
Yeah.
so all of our technology, USB drives, flash drives, computers, clouds, all gone. All of that information just gets wiped out, and we literally get sent back to the Stone Age, where we have to learn how to draw and try and tell stories by carving into stone and rock and all that kind of stuff. And it really kind of surprised me in how much it scared me, to the idea of like, there's a lot of speculation that has gone on with the past of where we've come from. And why is it that dinosaur bones are here but a person's never seen a dinosaur? Why is it that how is it that we can't figure out, with all the technology we have helicopters, we have we've studied magnets, we still can't figure out how to get a stone to the top of a pyramid and make the pyramid perfectly symmetrical the way they have, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it was just interesting. I didn't mean to go completely off topic here, but it was just interesting. It was a very interesting episode because it opened up my mind to the fact that, like, man, we're really small. We're just a speck, like speck of time. That's all we are. And yet sometimes we get so bogged down with what we think is important, when in reality it's like, no,
Possibly inconsequential, right? It could just
yeah.
be the least consequential thing, right? All the social media stuff. I mean, I think back to the days of Friendster, and MySpace and Napster, right? And like
Oh,
those
am I in
don't
your top
exist
eight?
anymore. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the whole top eight things, like it's a funny notion to think that Facebook may not be around in 10 years, right?
Hmm.
And it's like a lot of technologies. They are top of the food chain one day, but they can easily be replaced by something else, like very fairly easily and fairly quickly. Which there's pros and cons about that, but it's sort of the truth, right? It's like there's, Meta just came out with Threads, right? Is Threads going to be the Twitter killer? Of course, that's like the topic, the headline du jour these days. Maybe, but maybe not. But that's sort of just the point, right? Nobody really knows, right, how this is going to pan out. And so, at a high level, like I try and tell myself not to worry about this too much, right? Like that social media is poison, I mean, yes, it's great to keep up to date with your friends and your friends' babies and their vacations and stuff, but I'm just still really an offline, in person kind of individual, right? I just living life for me is very much about the physical experience of doing things with people I enjoy spending my time with, right? With my friends, my family, and and just fun people. And I don't know. I mean, yes, I played a lot of video games and Nintendo, right, growing up. So I do very much understand how gaming can be a lot of fun, right? Sort of these online, right, immersive worlds and experiences. Um, so yeah, but my point is, right, we're going to figure it out. It's probably going to continue to be ugly, right? It's going to be a
Yeah.
pretty brutal, ugly process at certain turns, but obviously there's lots of great things that have also come out of social media, and connecting people, right? Literally from all around the world, and being able to create, sub communities like, right, gun culture and gun community, online. So yeah, it's not all bad. There's some, rainbows and butterflies,
Well,
out of the situation too.
I also think that we have a very interesting perspective of it because like we're a lot of us are in that generation where we started off in the analog world and we got to watch the digital world become a reality. Like I remember the first computer I ever had that had the internet. Like there were only like 15 sites I could visit,
Yeah.
and like those sites only got updated once a month. So like nothing super special, right? And then it just gradually got moved to faster and faster internet and whatever. But yeah, there was a time where like my parents came home and literally locked the door and told me not to come home until the streetlights came on. Like I
Yep.
wasn't
Yeah.
allowed in the
Nice.
house.
Yeah. Wow.
Like
Nice.
do that with your kid now, the cops will be showing up saying that you're neglecting them. It's like a completely different world, right? Like you wanted to know where all your friends were. All you did was you jumped on your bike, you rode around your neighborhood until you found the 12 other bikes sitting in someone's front yard.
Sitting
And
in the
you're like,
front yard. Yeah.
that's where they are.
Yeah.
And
So there was an NPR segment a few years ago that was talking about this university research project where 40 some years ago, right, they interviewed these parents and they were looking at how they were raising their kids. And one of the questions that they asked the parents was, how far do you, in miles, like how far away from the house do you allow your kid to go unsupervised, right? And these kids are whatever, their ages 6 to 12, something like that, right? And 40 years ago, the average answer was something like 2.74 miles, something like that, right? That these
yeah,
parents were comfortable, right, with their kids being out of the house, not supervised. And so then the study, they interviewed the kids, right? The kids from 40 years ago that are now adults. And they asked the same questions. And that 2.74 mile number came all the way down to like 0.12 miles, which basically equated to like 2 or 3 blocks
yeah.
away from home, right? And it's just, yeah, I mean, I grew up similar to you. It's like I had so much freedom. My parents trusted me. I don't think that the world is any more of a dangerous place, right, than it was before, kind of thing. Maybe that's naive, but I think there's just a lot of critical social skills and coping skills, life skills, right, that like we all build as children when we don't have our parents hovering like helicopters over us, trying to dictate and control everything that happens. And I'm very thankful for my parents, giving me that kind of freedom, right? The freedom for me to make mistakes, to really mess up, right? And
Yeah.
figure it out, right? Like I didn't have their protection, when I got myself into certain messes. It's like I've got to negotiate this either on my own or with my friends, and we're gonna figure it out. But that's like these building blocks of resilience, of teamwork, of learning how to communicate, literally learning street smarts, right? And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, call me old school, but I think we need a little bit more of that, not just with kids, but also adults as well.
Common sense is not nearly as common as it used to be.
Yeah, it's becoming more like uncommon sense.
Yeah, yeah. To have common sense makes you the you're the oddball.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
what? What do you mean? Of course, naturally, that seemed like a perfect idea to go ahead and just leave my child at home while I went and got drunk for 4 hours. Why? What was wrong with that? You're like, okay, yeah, that makes
yeah,
sense. Bright Insight was the YouTube channel. That was what I was searching here. Bright Insight is the YouTube, and they've got these whole like, it's mad scary that they show these examples that are like a lot. You can go and find these examples just laying out in the wilderness at some of these recreation or historical sites, where you look at what they accomplished with the tools they were supposed to have, with us thinking that they were supposed to be using hammers and chisels. And you're like, oh yeah, how did they do that?
yeah. It's
There's no
fascinating.
way they could have done that with it. But now, before we get a little bit too far off of context here, there is something that we did talk about at NRA, and I wanted you to have a moment to be able to bring it into light, and that is the Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that organization, kind of what you do with them, or what that organization does. What are they trying to highlight, and what just tell us a little bit more about that
Yeah,
organization.
absolutely. So APAGOA is a pro-gun Asian American focused organization that I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm on the board for the org. And the birth of APAGOA came out of the pandemic when we started seeing this really dramatic increase in racist attacks against Asian Americans. And for me, I'm half Chinese and half Japanese, but just never really kind of made being Asian American a thing. It's like, well, I don't know. I was born this way. There's really nothing notable about it. That sort of was my old sort of perspective, right? That talking about my Asian American background wasn't useful or necessary. But the pandemic really changed how I think about being Asian American. And, here in San Francisco, right, we were having, and we still have, a number of really deadly attacks against Asian Americans, right? Here in one of the most progressive, diverse cities in the world, you think that, oh, you wouldn't have to worry about being Asian American. But right, there are all these attacks happening, and there are a lot of scared people, right? Scared Asian Americans who are literally being targeted, because of the color of their skin. And so that was very unsettling for me. Like I've experienced racism before, but nothing extreme, just whatever, racial
The occasional
insults
name
and
calling.
yeah, like
Yeah,
whatever,
me
right?
too
Like
in high school. Yeah, it was
yeah,
like, oh, you want to call me a chink or a kook? It's like, okay, yeah. Do you feel better about yourself? Because I'm late for
yeah,
class now.
it's
So,
it's it's
and I always just
annoying.
let it rub off, like blow off, like yeah, whatever.
Yeah. But right, it's one thing to deal with name calling. It's a whole nother thing, right? If we're talking about physical violence, right? Criminals
Absolutely.
assaulting Asian Americans, killing a number of Asian Americans in these racist attacks. And the constant is almost like a daily onslaught, right, of negative news, like attacks against Asian Americans. And so I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, what can I do, right? What is my place in this situation where I can be helpful? Given, right, I'm a top shot champion, right? I'm the firearm safety ambassador in the industry, right? I have my platform, but beyond that, it's like I'm just a concerned community member, right? That wants to help do as much good as I can. and try and not just help people feel safe, right, but actually make them safe. And right, promoting safe, responsible firearms ownership and training, right, is clearly a very logical option for me. And so the formation of APA GOA happened a little over 2 years ago. It's been very satisfying for me to see Asian Americans from all across the country, joining APA GOA and meeting other Asian Americans who, they didn't realize, hey, there's actually a lot of Asian Americans who own guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a very comforting thing, right, for a lot of individuals. I'll say personally for myself, like I just generally don't look at things through the racial lens. Like, I don't know, I have lots of friends from, right, I don't know, all different types of races and ethnicities. But I think the reality is this, right? I was a little what's the word I'm looking for? I was a little skeptical, I think, as maybe the right word at first, around creating a race-based gun, organization. Because I think of, again, my own sort of personal experience of like, right, I don't usually make a big deal right out of my race or ethnicity. But the reality is that a lot of people do, right? A lot of people do, right? That their race is one of their key identities. And so, I have a personal philosophy of meeting people where they are, right? Whatever that means in the given situation, right? If we're talking about gun control and gun rights, I need to meet someone where they are, right? If they've never shot a gun before, I can't like start talking about, assault weapons bans and magazine capacity restrictions. Like, it's probably going to be too much for them, right? If they've never even shot a gun, they don't have any context, right, for what this is, or if they've had a negative experience with firearms, right? It's like we need to understand and respect, right, where people are coming from. And so with APA GOA, like, I've just seen how satisfying and how fulfilling it's been for a lot of APA GOA members, right, to meet other like-minded individuals, right, who are pro-gun, who are all about safety, education, and community, right, and seeing these, right, communities, right, build within the gun community, right. Again, meeting people where they are. I was like, look, I don't hang out with people based on race, but look, the reality is lots of people do, and that's been a common theme throughout all of mankind, right? Like, there's just lots of people who want to hang out with people who look like them, talk like them, sharing all the cultural, connective tissue, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and even people that will emulate it, like they'll look at a group of people and be like, "Oh, that's the popular group over there. What all do they like to do?" Now all of a sudden, "Oh yeah, I like that too," and they start to emulate it. So and not to say that it's always fake, because sometimes you try something that you never wouldn't. Like for me, hunting. Never knew I liked hunting until I got out and I started hunting, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my god, I'm a hunter! I didn't realize I was a hunter. Jesus Christ!" But. No, and I'll agree to that. And see, I'm in the same boat as you in the fact that, like, growing up, even to have people make those racist comments to me, like, a lot of the times I was like, dude, we're both 14. You don't even know what a chink or a gook really is. You just know that it's supposed to try and hurt my feelings. But in reality, like, I would look at him and be like, dude, I was born in Las Vegas. Okay, like, yeah, I look Asian, but I'm American. Like, I was born and raised here. Yeah. It's not like I'm a transplant or anything like that. And it just made me giggle, because my mindset was always like, yeah, my historical background, my ancestry is that of Korean, but I'm an American. I'm not Korean. I can go to Korea. I can enjoy Korean. I love the culture. Like, don't get me wrong. I miss some good Korean food. Unfortunately they just don't have good Korean food here in Chillicothe, Missouri. Home of sliced bread, right? So that's the thing I miss in Vegas. But like, and my grandma and my mom were there too, and they cooked like at home Korean cooking and stuff. So I love my heritage, but at the same time, I also don't necessarily let it like. It's not what I base my entire existence on, because again, I'm an American here. There are things that I like. There are things I don't like. And that's just who I am. It's not necessarily like, well, in Korea, it's bad luck to like this. So that's why we don't like it in the house. I'm just kind of like, No, I like it. You know,
Yeah.
if they were like bourbon is bad luck, I'd be like, well, then I'm gonna get myself a black cat so I can cross that bitch every day too, because I ain't giving up bourbon, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think a couple things. Yeah, the it was scary seeing a lot of the flare up for people openly, being racist towards Asians. Um, and I always joked about it, but like I knew it was serious. But at the same time, I was like, man, these people really want to be pissed off. We're gonna turn all their cell phones off. We're gonna bomb all their TVs. Like we're gonna hit it with malware and all that kind of stuff. And then there's like 4-1 of us. Like we'll just take over the earth if we really wanted to, right? Keep pissing us off, kind of thing. I always joked about that, but no, yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having an organization that is based on pride for your culture, as long as it's not like it's one thing to have a culture where it's about connecting with people on that level of the historical value and importance and sharing cultures and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's not to like attack the other people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like this is our tribe, you're your tribe,
Right.
and if you get too close to us, then we're going to have to go to war. It's kind of more of that finding connection amongst like, sometimes you have to find a little connection before you can make the big connection.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if something like race or your ethnic heritage and stuff is what gets you to that world where you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize there's so many people that this is where we started, but oh my gosh, we just have so much more in common other than just the fact that we're Asian.
Yeah, and there's just been so many first-time gun owners in APAGOA that that's their gateway right into the gun community, right? And to this point, well, whether they stay within sort of Asian American circles or whether they expand right to sort of the broader, wider gun community. I mean, it's sort of here nor there for me. It's again back to making sure that one, I want more Asian Americans to understand and at least respect the Second Amendment, right? And so much of that comes to it's just education, right? It's about dispelling ignorance and myths, dispelling myths. One thing that's been really fascinating to see with APAGOA is the number of first-time gun owners who are either first or second generation immigrants, right, to this country. And that's a game changer, right? It's an absolute game changer. Right? You have naturalized citizens or born here, and they pick up a gun for the first time and they become a gun owner, and that is a generational shift, right? Happening right there, right? And back to the hunting thing, right? Like my father was the first generation gun owner, right? In my family, but he didn't hunt. Now I'm a hunter, right? And so, I don't know if I'm going to have kids, but if I do have kids, like we're going to go hunting, right? We're definitely going hunting. And I have nephews and nieces, and I would love to take them hunting, right? So whether it's like my own kids or my other, younger generations in my family, right? This is how family traditions start, right? They start with somebody in your family doing a thing. And with gun ownership, right? Unless you have somebody, usually, right, it's a family member, right, that's going to introduce you to a hobby, an activity, or a culture or a way of life. And so for more Asian Americans, I'm seeing APAGOA, right, being a conduit, right? We're opening up and dispelling these myths, right, that guns are bad and guns are evil, right? And you see lots of responsible Asian Americans, right, owning guns. And well, now let me say this. One thing that is very unique and distinctive about an Asian gun group is the language barrier, right? Now, I used to come from a place where, okay, look, if you live in our country, you should speak English. And that was very much absolutist attitude that I used to have. But the pandemic like really changed my perspective when it comes to our constitutional rights, especially the Second Amendment. Should a language barrier prevent somebody from defending themselves with a firearm? Right? Should English be a requirement to own a gun in our country? And for me, the answer has to be no. Right? That the Constitution, right, shouldn't require you to speak English, right, to exercise your freedom of religion, right, freedom of speech, your Second Amendment rights. It just goes on and on and on. So, APA GOA has been wonderful because we have a pretty notable Chinese population within APA GOA, and Chinese language firearm instruction has been a pretty strong kind of request and need, which I think is, the NSSF, which is the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the firearms industry trade group. The NSSF has a good relationship with APA GOA, and we're educating the industry on some of these opportunities, right, that may not have been seriously considered before, such as, can we train more firearms instructors who speak, Mandarin and Cantonese, but train them, right, as firearms instructors so they can actually go train other, either native Chinese speakers, or if their English proficiency isn't at, a near native level, or at least at a level where they can safely learn, right, how to shoot a gun. Hey,
Right.
what does it matter if they're being trained in Chinese or in Spanish or in Japanese or Korean or whatever language, right? The Second Amendment is for everybody, right? And in order for us to fully believe that and to execute that vision, right, that civil rights, right, are for everyone, regardless of what language you speak, we have to meet people where they are, right? Just because you may not speak English proficiently, then you know what? The firearms community and industry, we need to come to them, right? And train more firearms instructors in foreign languages, right? So we can expand gun culture, right? And make this a truly big tent kind of community and culture.
Hmm. Yeah, and you know what? You bring up a good point there, because I was very much like you too. Like, man, we're in America. Why? What is this? Why are you speaking Spanish? Like, was kind of my mindset. But what I realized was that a lot of the times, that's going to work itself out amongst that family, because a kid that is brought up in the U.S. will learn English.
Yeah.
So it's not like that family line is going to forever only know how to speak Spanish, and English will never become a language. Grandpa's just 80 years old. He lived his entire life speaking Spanish, and he doesn't feel like learning how to speak English. He doesn't care if you don't understand him, which is a feeling as I get older, I totally understand. Like, I don't care if you like me or not. It's like,
yeah, totally.
so to understand, to have the patience. And when I did EMS, that was another big thing for me. Cause in Vegas, there were people from all over the world. The first time I had a patient tell me, and I said, okay, sir, so about how tall are you? And they were like, oh, 217 centimeters. And I was like,
oh, you're like, whoa.
Okay, how many feet is that? Like, and then I said, and how much do you weigh? Like, after I did the calculation, I was like, oh man, I'm so glad that's over. I go, okay, and how much do you weigh? And he goes, about 12 stones. And I was like, and how much does each stone weigh in pounds, please? But like, then I had conversations with people, or having to interact with patients that were from France, that were from Germany, that were from, all these, and that's all they spoke. So, it's hard to try and mime to someone, like, are you having chest pain or breathing problems? Like, how do you mime that to someone and then have them understand what you're talking about, instead of just looking like some guy trying to act like a mime? So, no, I never even considered that something as simple as just communicating safety things to people when they don't understand can be very, very difficult. And when you're talking about something that is as complex as a firearm, because it's not typically, like we all know, keep the booger hook off the bang switch and the gun won't go off kind of thing typically. But the first thing most people that are older, that have watched movies and TV shows, the first thing they want to do is put their finger on the trigger, because that's what the media has taught them. That's exactly right. Like, even a kid understands the idea of put a magazine inside a gun, point it and shoot kind of thing, right? They don't fully understand what happens. They just know that this is what I'm supposed to do because this is a gun kind of thing. And when you talk about education, see, I think that's also another thing that we need to focus on more for the gun culture to become a little bit more normalized, is the idea, like, so my daughter, my older daughter now is turning 16 this year, right? So obviously I took her out. I think the first time I let her shoot a gun was maybe she was 5 or 6 years old. And she used to come with me to the gun range all the time. And anytime she wanted to shoot, I told her, I was like, if you ever want to see your gun, shoot your gun, all you have to do is ask me. I'll drop what I'm doing. We'll go to the range right then and there, and you can shoot it until you're tired, right? And and she's kind of brought up more in a liberal household on her mom's side, very liberal ideas and all that kind of stuff. So she's kind of a little bit more liberal, versus me being a little bit more on the conservative side. But she has no desire to take gun rights away because she sees a safe full of guns. She's been taught about guns. She understands that a gun can't go off until someone picks it up and physically manipulates it to go off. And even then, they have control of where it goes off. I've fired hundreds of thousands of rounds, and none of them have found a human body yet. They've always been into targets, steel, berms, whatever. So she understands that. And I think when you start teaching these kids about, and it's one thing to tell, like, how many times have you told a kid something and they went and did it anyway?
Yeah, of
right.
course.
So clearly, just talking to your kids about firearm safety, while it's a good thing, talking to them is still going to eventually go out in one ear, out the next, or maybe they just they're listening to you, but they don't fully understand. It's another thing to completely let them experience it, and then understand what the consequences of their actions are. And that, again, is the education portion, right? Like how many kids would not get accidentally shot if they were taught the 4 firearm safety rules, because they understand that this is a tool. This is a saw can cut your hand off. That doesn't, that means my kid is not allowed to go play around a saw until they understand what the saw is meant for and how to safely use it. Right. So for me, I think, like you said, like trying to get into more junior worlds, but I think it needs to almost start to middle school, high school is where they need to start. In my high school, we had an ROTC program, and the ROTC program had an air rifle program, and I did the air rifle team. So while it's an air rifle, we still obviously followed the safety protocols. We wore eye protection. We didn't point the rifles at anything that we didn't intend to shoot. We set up back berms. We always knew what was behind.
Nice.
We used to put up warning signs saying, don't enter this area because this is a live fire area, kind of thing from right now, right? So I think by normalizing the firearms world and making it more accessible, and then more education at the kid level and the experience at the kid level too, I think would be a huge turning factor, because getting the youth more involved in firearms and the education and the knowledge and the experience is, I think, going to be what can really, really help our fight against the Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
Because, that whole saying of strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and bad times create strong men, kind of thing. And it's unfortunate because right now we kind of seem in that area where we've had good times for a while and we've created a very, very weak generation, Not that I get it. I was a teenager. I remember that I used to want to play video games, but even then, again, that's another generational gap, because when video game consoles first came out, if you wanted to play a video game with a friend, your friend had to physically come over and plug a controller in with you, and then you could sit there. And even then, you were very careful about the shit talking, because he could literally turn around and punch you or throw the controller at you or something. So there was still that level of respect, versus now it could be, all the funny videos you can find on YouTube of little 14-year-old boys telling someone that, their mom, the person they're talking to, oh, well, your mom's in my room right now. And you're just like, well, you wouldn't say that to anyone's face. No. And yet here you are just saying it, do a big old TV screen to someone that you don't know. But, I don't know. I think getting kids involved would change the mindset and get them to understand that, like I said, it's a tool, and every tool can be used for good or bad, depending on who picks it up, right? So
and getting kids involved, especially with firearms, often it's going to have to usually come from an adult. Kids can want to do, they can want to do a lot of things, but especially if you're young, I learned how to shoot at the age of 6 as well. And it was something that I had asked my dad to do, and he took me. But what if the kid, what if a kid, doesn't have anybody in their family, that owns a gun, that's where, trying to create avenues and venues, for kids and adults, of all ages, to come and learn how to shoot. APAGOA has been one of the many groups, that are out there where, we have, fun, shooting events. we had an event about a year ago here in the Bay Area, and yeah, we had people all ages, right, come. And clearly, right, there's other shooting events where there's a lot of young kids, right, who come to learn how to shoot. It's their first time. I remember I was in Southern California at this event, and anybody who wanted to come and just like shoot a little bit with me, it was like a celebrity thing. And this little kid, he must have been like 4. I mostly held the gun, for him, but it was a pistol, and basically he pulled the trigger, right? I was basically holding the gun for him, but he loved it, right? That was such a positive experience for him, and his parents were thrilled too, and like that's the kind of positive memories though that we can all create with people, right? Whether you're really young, I was teaching some of my personal friends how to shoot about a month ago, and they were really nervous and really anxious because, right? I mean, yeah, let's be honest, right? Shooting a gun for the first time can be a pretty nerve-wracking experience, and it should be, because if you mess this up, you can hurt yourself or others, and you don't want to be down. You just don't want that to happen. But my friends loved it, like and they're decently liberal. They're not like anti-gun or anything, but they had a great time, right? And that positive experience for them, I hope goes a long way, right? For gun owners and for gun rights in this country, because right there's no shortage of anti-gun legislation, right? That is coming down at all levels, right? At the federal level, state level, and local level too. And so ultimately, it comes down to us voting, right, for voting for gun rights, voting for politicians who are pro-gun. So for me, this is I have a very grassroots attitude and approach to this, right, to gun rights, which is I need to take individual people. Right? Sometimes it's one person. Sometimes it's one person. I take one person in the range to make a difference, and that's something that everybody can do. I don't care who you are. You don't need to be top shot anything. You can just be, hey, like you don't even need to be a gun owner, right? You can go to the range. Lots of ranges rent guns, right? Go to the range, rent a gun or two with a friend, and share that experience. Right? Teach someone new, and that's the way that we're going to win the fight. And so.
And I will add one more suggestion. If you're not a gun owner and you want to try to go shoot a gun, absolutely go to a range that has a rental program so you can rent a firearm, and then tell the person behind the counter that you've never shot a gun before and you could really use a little bit of help.
Yeah.
Because working at a gun store when I did, man, it was scary how many times someone would go out and try and just figure it out and do so many things wrong and unsafe that it would bring me from around the counter to go out to the range and be like, hey, you keep pointing the gun back at the glass or whatever. Like, then they would tell me like, well, I've never shot before. Like, okay, makes sense. Now let me help you out here because I want to explain what you did and why we don't want to do that. So again, it was that education thing. So do not let the fear of never doing it before stop you from ever doing it, because how will you know unless you try?
Yeah.
I try and tell my daughter that all the time whenever I put some new food in front of her. I'm like, hey, you can't tell me no until you've actually had a bite, because for all you know, this could be the best thing in the world.
Does she roll her eyes at you though? Does she roll her eyes, or does she try new things with gusto?
No, but that doesn't stop me from trying, right? Like I said, I can keep talking it goes in one ear and out the next, but it's not going to stop me from trying.
She'll appreciate.
I will say yeah, exactly. Like that's my mindset too. Like it's one thing to the saying is always, by the time you realize your parents were right, you normally have a kid telling you that you're wrong. And that's where I'm at. Like my parents were always pushing me to try new things, experience new things. And, no matter how stubborn I was, I wanted peanut butter and jelly. No, I don't care about this tiramisu. That looks weird. Why is there bread in the middle of that pudding stuff? Like I don't want, and now tiramisu is one of my favorite desserts that I could just smash an entire thing up by myself.
Well, that's a fun fact.
Oh, dude, gosh. Well, let me put this way. I love desserts. Like when I was a kid, it was like, okay, I'm going to have one plate of salad. I'm going to have one plate of food and 4 plates of desserts. That's when I went to the buffets in Vegas. Right. So. Right on. Well, Chris, I know you got some stuff that you got to take care of real quick. I always kind of end my shows with some fast fire questions, and then I'll give you a moment to kind of chat about whatever it is that you need to do. But
Cool. Hit me with
the
it.
first question I got for you is candy corn, yummy or what the fuck?
What the fuck?
Thank you. Yes, I don't know who's buying it, but stop.
Stop buying candy corn. It's a national
Stop buying candy
embarrassment.
corn. It is gross. Okay, I don't care how many times you think no, it's gross. Okay, Friends or The Office?
The Office.
We used to be friends too.
Oh,
No, I love both, but Friends is what it was my favorite growing up because there was always an episode for anything that you were going through in life, you know, and Friends just was there for you. So, would you rather owe money or owe a favor?
this is a good one. I'd rather owe money. I'd rather owe money because it's a very specific thing that I owe, right? But the favor could just be like anything. And what's the scope of the favor? Is it sort of symmetrical with whatever debt, that created the favor in the first place, kind of thing. So yeah, I'd rather owe money.
Or is someone going to walk in your house and be like, I need you to come with me. You can't ask me where we're going. We're going to hurt people, and you can't ever ask me, or you can't ever tell anyone about it again. Like, okay. Are we taking your car or mine?
Yeah.
So, okay. Chinese or Hawaiian takeout?
Chinese.
Okay.
I love Hawaiian food. I love Hawaiian food so much, but Hawaiian food's range is much more narrow than Chinese food, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
that is true.
there's just so much, and even here in San Francisco, we have some Hawaiian restaurants, but there's way more Chinese restaurants. So I can get Chinese food in more hours of the day versus Hawaiian food. So it's like, yeah. Loco Moco. Loco Moco is one of my favorite
Yes.
Hawaiian dishes. Oof.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. That or chicken katsu.
Oh
my
gosh. Oh yeah. Chicken katsu and some
I'm
macaroni
missing
salad.
Asian food so much here in Chillicothe.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I should use you.
And the last question is: would you rather be a Star Wars Jedi or a Harry Potter wizard?
Jedi. Star Wars Jedi. Yeah.
What is it about the Jedi that beats the wizard for you?
I mean, it's just a generational thing. Okay, look, magic is awesome. And yes, like being a magician would be amazing. But I don't know, Harry Potter is very like childish and juvenile to me because I was just older. I was just older when Harry Potter came out, right? And seeing Star Wars as a youngster, I was like, oh, okay, like, hey, being a Jedi would just be incredible. Because also, I don't know, it's just more real in some regards. Like magic, I love magic, but magic's not real, right? But but if we're talking
being a
about
Jedi
Harry
is not
Potter,
real either.
what are you talking about? Of course, being a Jedi.
I've seen David Blaine make quarters disappear, but I have yet to see a laser sword. I thought we were supposed to be carving turkeys with those by now.
Laser swords are becoming more of a thing, like real like plasma laser swords.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's like, oof, that's some cool stuff.
Dude, can you imagine the ER trips that are going to take place as soon as those become commercially available? So many people are going to accidentally cut limbs off, and they're already cauterized, so there's nothing.
Yeah,
you can do
exactly. That's what I was going to say. They're already cauterized, so it's like, well, maybe we can reattach the thing, but
yeah, you shouldn't have been, but no, I see, and again, I'm kind of in that world where like I didn't see Star Wars when it was coming out, but I did see Star Wars at a young age, and then pretty much like a couple years after that was when Harry Potter started coming out, and I kind of fell in with that. Man, if I had to pick though, I feel like a Star Wars Jedi would be the way to go, because with the Harry Potter world, like if you lose your wand, you're kind of a little screwed. You're all of a sudden very limited to what you can do. Versus a Jedi, like you lose your lightsaber, you can still move things, you can still push things, you can still, do some stuff.
Yeah, and also, but for me, like with Jedis, there's a stronger code, right? And like honor. I mean, sure, Harry Potter, of course, sort of like, only use magic for good. But it's like, well, like what does good really mean? It seems very flimsy in the Harry Potter world. Um, I
Well, and
mean,
they didn't always, actually. There were a lot of people that were very, very loosey-goosey with their magic that did things
mm,
that were questionable, but no,
Jedi,
I would agree
Jedi
with
for
you. I
me.
think Jedi's the way to go.
Yeah.
So, right on. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This last part is basically open floor for you. If there are any sponsors you want to thank, any people, family members, or organizations that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to kind of shine some light on, the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, if anybody is interested in learning more about the Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association, which is a mouthful, also known as APAGOA, check out apagoa.org. You don't have to be Asian American to join APAGOA. We have lots of spouses that are not Asian, married to Asian significant others. We have a lot of allies as well. So APAGOA is it's for everybody. So yeah, check us out on apagoa.org. I'm available at topshotchris.com and on a number of social media platforms at topshotchris. And then for any new shooters who are listening to this podcast, if you're interested in a handful of free instructional videos for the new shooter, whether it's pistol, rifle, or shotgun, my YouTube channel, in conjunction with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, we have got about 40 different videos that are all shorter format, 2 to 5 minute videos, talking everything about proper pistol grip to stance. What is caliber? What does somebody mean when they say 22 or 9 millimeter? And like, why are there two different measurement systems in caliber? There's a whole bunch of great free content. Link is nssf.it/topshotchris. And so again, a bunch of free videos for the beginner shooter, and that's to complement my book, Shoot to Win. Hang on, let me grab a copy here. This is my book, Shoot to Win. Available.
Look at that
on,
young gun. Look at that young gun. Back when he was fresh off his win.
Look at this dude. Look at that guy. Yeah, Shoot to Win is again a book for the new shooter, but also even if you have some experience, it's always great to go back to the fundamentals. Every great athlete, every great shooter, if we're having some accuracy issues, right? Oftentimes it's about going back to the fundamentals. And so Shoot to Win teaches those core fundamentals of firearm safety and also marksmanship. So check out Shoot to Win if you're looking for a great gift, or if you're just looking to learn how to shoot or to sharpen your skills.
Perfect. Well, there you go. Again, Chris Cheng, thank you so much. I appreciate you, brother. For sure. God, what is the next thing? We'll probably see each other at SHOT Show then, right?
Feel like SHOT.
That's gonna be the next one that we'll probably see.
That'll be
all right.
That'll probably be it.
We'll probably try and plan something for SHOT Show. Again, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I really do appreciate your time and the good information and the couple laughs we had thinking that Indeed. Jedi are real. So
thanks so much for having me, John. Had a great time chatting with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Open Action with me, John McClain, brought to you by Armscor and Rock Island Armory. Make sure you stay tuned, follow along, subscribe, because I got some more awesome episodes coming out. With that being said, though, we'll see you later.